know what? Right out of the gate, I just gotta say a big thank you to the entire Kraken team for listening, taking care of business, and just not making this game too stressful at the end of it. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where the Seattle Kraken do take care of the Anaheim Ducks, defeating them 5-2 for their 5th consecutive win. And really, that's what this game was. It was just the Kraken taking care of business, beating a team in the Ducks that they should be able to beat, and picking up those 2 easy points in the standings that are very important in this tight race atop the Pacific Division, which also at the moment happens to be the top of the Western Conference, as they now pull to within 2 points of both LA, who they still have a game in hand against, and also 2 points of the division leading Vegas Golden Knights, having played the same number of games as Seattle. And as I just suggested, they're just 1 point away from Dallas, who lead the Central Division and whom the Kraken are about to play 3 times in the next couple of weeks. So if they can continue this roll that they're on right now, they have a decent shot here in this home stretch of being the first seed in the West. But with that all being said, it is sometimes that eagerness to look ahead that can sometimes cause teams to overlook teams like the Ducks in this game, especially with it being a game that was the first one back home after a long road trip. And while I did say that in the end this game turned out to not be as stressful as all the games on said road trip, in the beginning, that was not necessarily the case, at least at the start of the game, where the Kraken were not the better team in the first few minutes. In fact, it was Grubauer who had to bail them out on a couple of pretty good scoring opportunities that the Ducks got in the first minute or 2 of this game. Thankfully, though, after Grubauer gets tested a couple of times early and comes up to the task, the Kraken are eventually able to settle in and turn things back the other way, and pretty much as soon as they do, they're the ones that end up getting on the board first, as it's that first line, Beniers' line, out on the ice for their second shift. McCann gets the puck up in front to Beniers, who's wide open in front of the net. He whips around with pretty much a half-empty net if he could just wrap it around Gibson. But as he tries to do that, the puck slides off of his stick just a little bit too early and goes wide of the net. Fortunately, Beniers is able to chase it down into the corner, get to it first, and get that puck down to Eberle, who's behind the net, and Eberle right out in front to, of course, it's not really his spot. It was kind of surprising to see him there, but coming down into the play, it's Jamie Oleksiak from right in front of the net, getting the pass from Eberle, and he puts it into the net to give the Kraken that 1-0 lead with his 9th of the season, continuing to build on a career year for him in goal scoring. And while it's not his 10th on the season for the Kraken, it is his 10th in a Kraken uniform, having just the 1 last year and now 9 this year, so a pretty big improvement. Then a little while later, more towards the middle of the period, it's that same line back out on the ice again, as Beniers carries the puck into the offensive end on a rush chance, and they kind of just end up creating something out of nothing, as Beniers tries to get the puck from the middle of the offensive end out to Eberle on the side to start the play in the offensive end and get things set up, but that gets broken up, bounces back to Beniers, who can't quite get a handle on it, but Larson, following into the offensive end, can get a handle on it. He gets the pass out to the other side to McCann, who is in his spot. McCann fires off the shot right after the pass gets to him, and that beats Gibson clean to give the Kraken the 2-0 lead halfway through the first. And at this point, it is feeling like we are going to get that sigh of relief after a few stressful games on the road. And of course, with the goal being that he just became the franchise's first ever 30-goal scorer. For those who aren't math experts, this is McCann's now 31st of the season and 49th point overall, as, at least at this point in the game anyway, he was closing in on back-to-back 50-point seasons. Though, with that being said, that having been the record from last year, since I forgot to mention it on the previous goal by Oleksiak with the primary assist for Eberle on that goal, Eberle does break McCann's record from last year with his 51st point on the season, getting that primary assist. So McCann still trying to chase Eberle down to retake that record for himself. Really then, the only unfortunate part of this first period, other than how it started, even though Grubauer came up with the saves to prevent that from becoming a problem, is the fact that right after both of these goals for the Kraken, there are penalties. The first one are offsetting penalties, so it goes to 4-on-4, but that still interrupts the flow of play and prevents the Kraken from really building momentum. They still end up scoring the second goal, but right after that one, they end up sending the Ducks to a straight-up power play. A power play that doesn't really go anywhere for Anaheim, but again, it serves to break up what could have been a momentum starter with that McCann goal. Still, at the end of one, the Kraken lead the Ducks 2-0. But then, unfortunately, once again for the second period in a row, the Kraken come out in the second a little bit flat-footed, and this time 35 seconds in, it ends up costing them as the Ducks do pull to within 1. With that having been said though, and also the fact that Dunn and Larson definitely could have played better defense on this particular goal, it's still just an absolute highlight reel goal, like season NHL highlight reel goal. And I mean, since it is the Ducks that we're talking about here after all, we all know who's scoring this highlight reel goal. It's obviously the walking, or I guess skating highlight reel himself, Trevor Zegras. I mean, don't get me wrong, Mason McTavish is also having a pretty good season as a rookie. Not near as good, but still pretty good. And in the running, at least for the Vice Calder winner, as Beniers is clearly going to win that award. Still, Zegras is the one to watch out for. And with this goal specifically, and the absolute incredible nature that we'll get to of how Zegras finds the back of the net here past Grubauer, it is a reminder that the one downside of the Kraken getting the win in regulation here against the Ducks is that it puts them that one step closer to adding Bedard to that roster. And if you put Bedard with Zegras, this division's in trouble for decades, or at least a decade and a half to come. Anyway, getting to the goal itself, it does originate off of a relatively harmless seeming play from the Ducks, which I guess isn't too dissimilar from how the Kraken scored their second one, but a pass gets them into the offensive end along the boards, where the pass to Zegras comes from, managing to bounce it over the stick of McCann and then just get it past Larson, who's the closer of the two defensemen. But Zegras, splitting Larson and Dunn in front of the Kraken net, is able to get that pass, get past both of them, and as he's right next to the net, he pretty much only has one option if he really wants to have a chance of scoring this, which is to put the puck between his legs and then put it perfectly top corner past Grubauer to give the Ducks their first goal of the game. And you can't even be mad if you're a Kraken fan. This is just an absolutely incredible goal. As Zegras, just look at it. I mean, seriously, what are you even supposed to do here? This guy's out here playing, I don't know, Quidditch with the stick between his legs, and then not only is he able to get a shot off like that, he's able to put it perfectly top corner in the one place Grubauer can't get to it to score this goal. This would be an impressive shot if he was able to do it normally on the forehand, facing the normal direction. But no, he's still able to do it with the puck on the end of his stick behind him between his legs and still get that perfect shot off. It's just, I mean, again, something straight out of Hogwarts, an absolutely magical play from a wizard of a player. And yeah, again, the thought of that on the same team as Connor Bedard is going to make the whole draft lottery process a nervous one here for Kraken fans who already have to deal with watching McDavid 4 times a season play against our team. And again, as if it wasn't obvious already how incredible this goal was, you know a goal is a particularly good one when there are excited murmurings at the replay shown on the Jumbotron of an away goal from the home crowd, which were pretty audible when they showed it after this one. The good news, at least for the Kraken, is that once again they're able to flip things around pretty quickly after the less than ideal start to a second period and start to get momentum going their way, which they don't turn into a goal right away like they did in the first, but eventually the Kraken, who do control play for the vast majority of the rest of this period, as we get into the final minutes, they do find the back of the net again, which is a good thing because it was starting to seem like we were going to go to the third period with the Kraken just leading by that one goal, and then it starts to get into that little bit more nerve-wracking time with them having just one goal late against a team they should be beating. But it never gets there as they do extend that lead back to 2 goals before the intermission. And it is Daniel Sprong who ends up doing it on, again, not the most dangerous seeming rush chance as Tanev passes it to Sprong along the boards entering the offensive end. And Sprong fires off a pretty tight angle shot on net that is blocked in front by Gibson, but it goes off of the heel of his glove, bounces over him, and then dribbles into the net behind him, to give Sprong, who's back in the lineup, not for Frodin, but actually for Donato in this game for the first time in a while. He gets his 16th of the season, and again, gets the Kraken back that one insurance goal that, at least for fans anyway, definitely made us feel a little bit better where the game was at. Of course, it would have felt even better had the Kraken managed to score on the power play that immediately followed this, but they aren't able to do that, so we do go to the third with that 3-1 score. And of course, just like the first 2 periods, this third period does not get off to an ideal start for the Kraken, as they end up sending the Ducks to a power play, which at least to the credit of the penalty kill, ends up being less dangerous than their 5-on-5 starts to the first and second, so they end up killing this one off pretty well, and then manage to bounce back, creating some momentum, leading up to about halfway, well, a little bit less than halfway through the third period, getting a power play of their own, which also doesn't get off to a particularly dangerous start. But as we get into the final seconds of this power play, it's the first power play unit out there for the second shift of it, and they're able to create actually two pretty good scoring opportunities. The first comes from McCann passing it down to Wennberg up by the net, and then of course Wennberg does a Wennberg thing instead of doing what he did earlier on a couple games ago and whipping around and trying to beat a goaltender that he has dead to rights one-on-one. He instead passes it out to Tolvanen on the other side, trying to get the backside goal, but Tolvanen isn't able to get it in time to catch Gibson off guard. So that opportunity gets, well, I wouldn't say wasted, as Wennberg ends up passing up a good opportunity for what turns out to be a great one. As the puck ends up back on the far side for McCann in his spot, he passes it to the other side for Tolvanen, who's also in his spot, and Tolvanen fires off the one-timer and puts it right past the toe of Gibson as he tries to stretch out to stop the puck, isn't able to get to it in time. Tolvanen scoring the power play goal and putting the Kraken up 4-1. So again, maybe temporary frustration that Wennberg did not decide to try and take that one-on-one opportunity with Gibson and instead passed it up to give the puck out to Tolvanen. But honestly, it's hard to be mad when, well, for one, you're against a Ducks team who is not particularly great on the penalty kill. And on one side of the ice, you've got McCann with the wrist shot that he has. And on the other side, you've got Tolvanen with that one-timer that he has. So it ends up working out in the end. And besides, now at this point, the Kraken have a pretty safe 3-goal cushion getting into the back half of the third period. I mean, this does come still a couple minutes before the halfway point, but we're getting into the final few minutes. And it does kind of show in the way the Kraken play the rest of this game, as they do pretty clearly ease up a bit on the offensive end of things and just try to kill the rest of this clock, which has mixed results as things do start to get pretty testy between the two teams, as the Kraken have a, well, basically insurmountable lead at this point with a couple of scrums around the Kraken net after Grubauer saves. And then nothing worse than what happens with about 5 or 6 minutes left to play. There is what at least to me seemed like a pretty dirty hit along the boards in the corner in the Kraken end. It's a shoulder. I mean, it would have been a clean hit if it was like body to body, shoulder to shoulder, but it's Comtois who goes shoulder to the head of Dunn, sending Dunn immediately to the ice, and he stayed down for a while along the boards. There's no call on the play. Eventually, Dunn's able to get up and pretty slowly get back into the play, as he was clearly shaken up by the hit, eventually getting to the bench. And it seemed like, even though there definitely should have been a call as far as anything I can tell, having not seen a replay of it, but it definitely seemed like there should have been a call for the shoulder to head contact there. No call, but Dunn manages to keep his cool right up until he gets onto the bench. And even before he closes the door on the bench, he turns, looks at the ref, and starts screaming at him loud enough that you could hear it across the arena. Not necessarily what he said, but that he was having some pretty heated words for that official. And then the final straw, I think, was probably him taking his stick and two hands smacking it along the boards right by the bench, which does get him sent to the penalty box for the 2-minute unsportsmanlike. And while it is understandable that he was angry, again, he got a bit headhunted there and there was no call. Yeah, it's, you yell at the ref that long and then slam your stick, you're probably going to get called. At the very least, though, while the refs weren't willing to come to Dunn's defense and do anything to try and protect his safety on what was a dirty hit to the head, at least the unpaid officials, as Forsland likes to call them, the entire home arena of fans, were willing to come to Dunn's defense in pretty clear fashion, with one of the loudest boos and loudest chants that I've ever heard in that arena, letting the refs know that they were, well, done with their crap. A very loud "refs you suck" chant that I'm sure could be heard on the broadcast, not just after this call is made and for the first few seconds of the ensuing Anaheim power play, but was reinvigorated when Dunn was sent to the locker room with his game over, which I think at the moment the fans took as him being kicked out of the game based on how he ended up in the box, but actually had, I think, more to do with the concussion spotter calling down to have Dunn go into concussion protocol since it was a hit to the head that he took and he stayed down for a while. So yeah, if you're, gonna at least pretend like you're looking out for player safety after the fact, that was definitely the right call to have Dunn checked out for a concussion. He doesn't end up returning to the game, not that it really matters because the Kraken had an insurmountable lead at that point, but that was why he ended up leaving the game, was concussion protocol, which hopefully they'll find that he didn't have a concussion and he can come back. But at the very least, it wasn't him getting kicked out of the game. And also, I suppose at least at this point, all of us Kraken fans are pretty much used to the fact that the NHL has no regard whatsoever for the safety of Kraken players. We've already seen it a number of times this season, or at least a couple, of suspendable hits, very suspendable hits, not leading to any discipline whatsoever from the Department of Player Safety. Now, this one from Dunn doesn't even draw a penalty. And of course, Alexiak, while it was probably a suspendable hit, gets suspended for something not even as bad as a couple of the ones against Kraken players. And really, the most discipline that's been handed out for a dirty play against a Kraken player was the $5,000 fine that Marchand got recently for the slew foot on Bjorkstrand, which he got I think, unsportsmanlike penalty in the game. It was a 2-minute minor, and he also obviously didn't get suspended for that one. And yes, that $5,000 fine is the most the NHL can hand out to a player because that's how the CBA works. But they could still suspend him for a game if they really wanted to punish him in his pocketbook, because he'd still lose money for that one suspended game, more than $5,000, especially with his contract. But again, no suspension. So yeah, $5,000 was the most they felt that Slewfoot was worth. Which again, for what it's worth, I suppose, is $5,000 more than the NHL decided the hit on Schultz earlier on in the season that had him miss 2 games in concussion protocol was worth, or the hit on Beniers that had him miss a couple games in concussion protocol was worth. Or even this hit on Dunn, I'm sure will have no punishment whatsoever. And who knows, he could also end up missing a couple of games in concussion protocol. Anyway, in the end, the Kraken do end up killing off this third Ducks power play of the game successfully, and then almost kill off the rest of the game as well, until eventually, and of course it had to be Comtois again, who the Kraken didn't decide to run, which does show some restraint that they weren't baited into going after a player and having someone do something dirty for the Kraken and then having another player get suspended, because I'm sure if the Kraken had run Comtois, that would have led to suspension. But unfortunately, as he's still out on the ice while Dunn is in the locker room, because, why punish the guy that has a dirty hit? Instead, just let him keep playing the game. He's the one that ends up scoring the second goal for the Ducks. The Kraken have a pretty broken play in their end of the ice. Just a complete defensive breakdown as Borgen was covering Comtois in front of the net, but instead, as the puck gets out from the boards with the Ducks in possession, he goes into a slide to prevent a pass a little bit too early, and the guy with the puck, who I don't remember who it was, it hardly even matters, just says, all right, and goes around him, passes it out to Comtois right in front, wide open in front of Grubauer, and he tips it in past Grubauer. Really not much Grubauer could do about it, to pull the Ducks to within 2, at which point, with less than 2 minutes left in the game, the Ducks decide that it's worth going empty net, and of course, not long after they do, after a pretty nice steal actually in the neutral zone from Schwartz, he ends up finding that empty net to give the Kraken the 5-2 lead. It's an unassisted goal, and that is where the score would finish. So the Kraken, finally in their 5th attempt in this 5-game winning streak, do manage to get that win that isn't really all that nerve-wracking at all in the end, with the Kraken having at least a 2-goal lead for the entire third period. So yeah, I mean, honestly, a pretty complete win for the Kraken outside of the frustration around the whole Dunn situation, and obviously a non-ideal start to all 3 periods that you definitely like to see cleaned up, at least by the time they play Dallas back-to-back here coming up in a little bit. Again, even though that's a team that has slipped of late, they lead the Central Division and have 1 more point than the Kraken with the same number of games played. So a good team that the Kraken will need to be at their best to beat. And also those are important points as far as standings going into the playoffs, if the Kraken are to win the Pacific anyway. And I mean, even with the 2 goals they did allow, again, one of them is just an absolutely spectacular play by a very talented player, and that kind of thing's just going to happen from time to time. And then the second one, yeah, that one's definitely a defensive issue that you certainly want to prevent from happening, at least in more meaningful parts of games in the future, but it does come in pretty much garbage time at that point, so it really didn't have much meaning in this game. So yeah, maybe not a perfect game from the Kraken, but certainly a pretty good one, and they did exactly what they needed to do against this team to get the 2 points that they needed to get against them. As we get to the 3 stars, there are, again, plenty of guys you could choose from, but at least the first star to me, even though he does allow those 2 goals like we talked about, both of them are pretty much out of his control. Philipp Grubauer, even with those 2 going in, still saves 19 of 21 shots and had a couple of pretty big saves. I mean, the 2 that he let in weren't even the most dangerous shots on goal. I mean, the Zegras one, you can make of that what you want, but Grubauer was fantastic in this game. The second star, I've got to go with Matty Beniers. He gets 2 assists in this game, and it may not have been his best game, but it certainly was a pretty good one from him. Obviously with the 2 assists, even if, yeah, one of them is kind of a bit of a more fortunate assist as it comes off of a deflected pass that he tried to make to Eberle. Still, even outside of that, he did start to get back to, after a couple of, I wouldn't say off games, but kind of just mediocre games from him, he got back to really doing a lot of those small things really well, winning puck battles along the boards, one of the better players in transition for the Kraken, and again, a part of that line with Eberle and McCann that was the most offensively dangerous for the Kraken all night long, especially in that first period where they generated the first 2 goals. And then the third star, I've gone back and forth with a number of guys. I thought about Larson for a bit, but he did kind of let Zegras past him for that Zegras goal. Still a pretty good night for him outside of that one instance. Otherwise, I did think about Eberle setting the franchise record for points with his 51st, and again, being a part of that line with McCann and Beniers. But I think I do have to give it to McCann with a goal and primary assist. He obviously has the still franchise record 31st on the season, and then has that beautiful cross-seam pass on the power play goal from Tolvanen. So there you go. We'll end up going Grubauer, Beniers, and McCann. I could definitely see an argument for switching Beniers and McCann there, but all 3 of them will end up getting stars. And yeah, let me know what you think down in the comment section below about this game. Certainly feel free to vent about the frustration with the Dunn situation and just that continued trend of not protecting Kraken players' safety whatsoever from the NHL this season. Yeah, and just, I guess, also on the other side of things, excitement for this 5-game winning streak, and now an Ottawa team coming in that, like the Ducks, actually, the Ducks have been playing pretty well of late for being one of the worst teams in the NHL. An Ottawa team that's coming in, playing pretty well, and still, it's an outside chance, but they're in at least the hunt for the playoffs, so they'll be giving the Kraken their best, especially considering the Kraken put up 8 on them in Ottawa earlier on this season. Until then, though, if you haven't made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, the buttons for that kind of stuff down below help support the channel, so I appreciate you using them. And stay safe out there. Be good to each other. God bless and go Kraken.